Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's web seminar, ROI of Codeless Test Automation, sponsored by testRigor and featuring Artem Golubev. I am Sarah Crocker, and I will be moderating today's session. Before our presentation begins, let me just briefly explain the console. The panel on the right has a feature to chat, ask questions, answer polls, or download the slide deck for today. If you minimize this panel, just click on the chat button to reopen it. If you experience any technical issues during the program, please send me, Sarah Crocker, a private chat, and I'll be happy to help you. There will be a Q&A session at the end, but please feel free to enter your questions at any time throughout the presentation. To optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience, please close any other applications you may have running in the background. Our event is being recorded and will be made available to watch on demand. Once the recording's ready, you'll get an email with access to the presentation. And with that, I'd like to hand it back over to Artem.
Hello, everyone. Good time of the day, wherever you are. And I'm happy to talk today about ROI of codeless test automation. And in particular, I will be discussing ways to actually calculate the ROI. And there are several ways. I'll talk about three and discuss what are our other options out there. I'll share some formulas and hopefully it will be helpful. But at first, let me start about codeless test automation. There are several tools out there on the market, and testRigor is very, very different. We allow our customers to write test cases in plain English, and those test cases are executed emulating how humans would do it from end user's perspective, as opposed to hooking up to details of implementation. All right, so on that, let's start. So first of all, which kind of automation we'll be talking about. We'll be in this case, the talk itself, it doesn't matter. The formulas we will be discussing will apply across the board. However, usually codeless test automation would apply to web and mobile. Challenges. What kind of challenges modern AI tools help to solve for people who are building automations? And in particular, interestingly enough, it helps in a lot of cases to solve the challenges which usually were considered unsolvable, and usually people would resort to manual testing for those because it was considered to be impossible to automate these things. And things like 2FA capture, third-party systems, UI changes, and well, there are certain things which are still impossible regardless of what tool are you using, and that is physical, no computer interface device. For example, if you're testing your software, then you need to make sure that the counter actually opens, then you should have some kind of other ways to validate that. Okay, so and there is a need. So think about it. The kicked off Q&A should be going on right now, where you can share what percentage of your test cases are covered right now. But on average, what we see across the board in the industry, it is only 30% of test cases are automated in 2022 in the industry, and there are several issues related to challenges with automations which codeless test automation tools are designed to help with. And it's pretty hard to build a lot of tests. using traditional tools like Selenium. As I mentioned, like 30% is a result of it. And if there are not many automated tests, then it's basically meaning that you can't retest everything, bugs in production, longer cycles, so on and so forth. And even with existing automation, it's a gigantic amount of maintenance. 5% of all tests always break, very high costs, and too slow to create. And like example how testRigor tool solves those challenges. testRigor helps to abstract away from using details of implementation and allow our customers to use purely end user level executable specifications, which testRigor will then execute, emulating how humans would do it. The difference is here, for example, not only you have to be an engineer in order to be able to write with Selenium code, but also it hooks up into details of implementation like those IDs, name, and XPath, as you can see here, as opposed to, in case of testRigor, there's a login built-in function, which will just log you in. Even if it wasn't like that, it would be just simple clicks and enters is exactly the same way as you would write it in your test cases. And surprisingly enough, that is actually the main reason why majority of the companies can't achieve 100% test coverage in the first place. And even if they do, why they spend such a gigantic amount of time on test maintenance is because on average in industry, again, your mileage might vary, of about 350 tests will consume a full-time QA engineer to just maintain those tests. Imagine that you need to have 3,500 of those tests. That means that you need to hire and employ 10 engineers just to maintain the tests, and you need more engineers if you need to actually build tests on top of it. Because the testRigor doesn't rely on those details of implementation, you can continually build tests with fewer resources. We'll get into how to calculate that specifically and how to put this kind of ROI in specific numbers. All right, so in general, there are kind of old way of building automation and a new way of building automation, and things are changing. Common sense prevails. If you think about it, everybody uses low-code tools right now. Because if it wasn't for that, everybody would still write a code in assembly language, and there wouldn't be such a thing as SQL, which is a classical example of a low code. So the current way, not a modern anymore, but traditional way of building tests is that people learn programming language, and then they learn automation concepts on the job, slowly build tests, and then just drown in maintenance. And we believe that the new way of it is that a little bit other way around. You can learn basic automation concepts and best practices within about an hour. And then you can just immediately start to be able to build the automation, knowing all you need to do is know those concepts, examples being repeatability, the concept of variable, generating unique data, and so on and so forth. And what modern codeless automation tools allow you to do is they save you time on test maintenance, and then specifically in case of testRigor, you can literally copy paste your test cases from your test case management system to make them executable as executable specifications. So in case of basically what we're taking advantage of is AI. So, and there are a lot of different ways how AI is helping. It helps in writing tests, element detection, and classification, in particularly, in order to be able to understand what it is and how to deal with it. Test writing assistance, test adaptations, and so on and so forth. Okay, so finally, we are on the right part of the presentation, and we will get into very, very minute and specific details on how to calculate ROI, what would be the process in your organization, and the ways people are doing that. We will be specifically discussing 3 ways of doing that: fewer bugs in production, saving budget, and improved efficiency. And of course, that might not be comprehensive, but it covers most common ways of doing that. And improved efficiency is something which is often overlooked. However, it might be a really good way in your particular case to prove the value of things you're doing. Okay. So let's start from fewer bugs in production. And well, technically speaking, it is probably the most correct and straightforward way of calculating the ROI of test automation in general and QA in general, and in particular codeless test automation is a very generic approach. And you basically, what you do in this particular case is you're going back off of first principles, and that is what QA organization is designed to do, or what QA in general is designed to do. And the goal of QA is to make sure that there are less issues in production, which could be caught during preliminary testings on different lower environments, such as staging testing and so on and so forth. So basically, if you can, putting it simply, if you can catch a bug before deploying it to production and you can code it, it provides a lot of value. Unfortunately, Google is not going to help you in this particular regard. And in this particular case, the way to make it a success is a process in your case. And well, if you look into price of the bug and some formulas in there, you'll see that the main part of it is everything lost or not gained due to all bugs which got into production. And that is, you probably don't know what those numbers are. However, in order to be able to calculate those, you want to be collaborating with the organization of CFO, and literally you probably want to go to your CFO, or maybe involve CTO if he is exposed to those numbers, but CFO probably um, uh, would be the right division to go to, because they usually do care about those numbers and those statistics. And you might be surprised that they might already have data at hand. So they probably have never shared it because it wasn't needed. However, you can come to them and ask for to estimate how much business was lost due to issues in production, and how much potential revenue was not gained because of the issues in production during let's say 12 last month. It's very important to make sure that it is scientific, right? So this way, if it is as scientific as is technically possible, then it will be much more plausible when you're doing the presentation to your leadership in order to um, promote certain approach or show wins and so on and so forth. And therefore, you want them to provide actual data, and I'm sure they will be able to help you out if they don't already have it in hands. Important stuff is to make it related to certain period. It could be 1 year, could be, I don't know, last 3 years. It doesn't matter, as soon as there is a very certain time period associated with it, and that would be your basis. So next thing is you get a number of bugs which got into production during the same period of time. And again, so in this particular case, as you can see, there is a little bit of ambiguity in here. And like you have to kind of use your judgment and figure out what number to use in here. So there are two options. One is total number of bugs which got into production, which you probably have number of, or if you know exactly which bugs affected which customers, you can use that. But I would assume that just number of bugs which leaked into production would be the right number, because oftentimes the organization of CF4 which cannot do the association. Sometimes if sales fail, and it might involve sales organization in order to provide some of the data, they might not have rigorous enough notes and statistics in order to be able to associate in certain particular issues. However, if there are certain issues which prevented the deal to be closed, or number of customers not be as high as expected during the time, or some churn and so on and so forth, like sometimes it is possible to associate it with bugs in general. So I would argue that just having the number of bugs leaked into production would probably be the right way to go, even though it might give you a little bit of a smaller number. And then once you, this way you can calculate price of the bug, which could be very helpful and handy, and it can actually help with the motivation at your team, so that they'll understand that whatever work we are doing providing tangible value, and each bug they prevent from being able to escape into production provide that tangible value to it. And again, so this price of the bug is just the business part of it. Again, if you want to be more rigorous, you can also add the time which had been spent on involving of catching, validating, communicating, and fixing that bug, rolling it out in production, and so on and so forth. So technically speaking, it is more, and you can go ahead and dig a little bit deeper into that. But from business perspective, the direct effect is this. And of course, when the value of automation in general, and specifically codeless automation, is very easy and direct to calculate. You can estimate or calculate decrease in number of bugs let's say this number, everything lost or gained due to all bugs, it's within a year. If within next 12 months you were able to decrease those number of bugs by certain percentage, let's say by 50%, like you can literally calculate that the value of what you have done, you can basically divide it by 2. So this is one way, or another way is just you stick with that price of a bug, a leak to production, which you calculated above, and you can basically track all the issues which were caught before getting into production. So that requires a little bit of of rigor, because you would need to track all of those issues which had been prevented from getting out into production. But once you do that, you can actually calculate the value right there. So there's two a little bit different ways of doing it. Whatever works best in your particular case, both of those numbers would have absolutely correct business sense. Well, next one is kind of popping up in the cases of um, the recent recession and slashing of budgets, money savings, and all this kind of stuff. And let's say if like with a codeless automation tool can enable your team to be able to build tests faster and dramatically reduce maintenance, then it actually frees up the resources which you can reallocate towards other areas such as API testing and so on and so forth, or even move to engineering instead of QA engineering. So this way, but since they had been relocated from that project, when you're calculating the value for that particular project, then you can claim that, hey, so we saved that amount of value. So this is very straightforward. So now let's get into probably the most interesting and overlooked way of calculating ROI, and that is ROI based on improved efficiency. And this is a little bit more interesting and tricky. However, it is it's in some cases a little bit easier to calculate and requires less effort on everyone's side. It could be a good starting point, and in some cases also make a lot of sense. In this case, what you're doing is you basically calculating the efficiencies. So, particularly, price is you calculating price of a test, right? How much does it cost to build a test? And then you get all the salaries of all people involved in building tests, dividing it by a number of, and I mean yearly salaries, dividing it by number of test cases automated last 12 months, and that give you magic price of a test, right? It's very straightforward. And of course, if you're just starting and haven't been 12 months, you can recalculate it for n number of months you have been working on it. However, there is another interesting part of there, because a price of a test in itself is not giving you complete picture. There's also a price of maintaining a test, which is 4.5 times higher than the price of building a test. So let me give you, and I can share later on an article which I will share with Techwell, and will share with you guys, where you can it goes into a lot of details, goes into specific example calculations, and specifically calculates where this 4.5 number coming from. But it is a calculated number. It's not something random or something like that. You calculate it based on performance on average in industry. Anyway, and basically, let me give you an example. For example, one QA engineer somewhere around Silicon Valley could be probably $120,000 a year, and if 120 tests were built during 12 months, that means that the price of a test is 120,000 divided by 120 is $1,000 per test. And the price of maintaining that test would be 4,500. So that is those are the base a number, and the total price of would be a sum of it. So it will be 5,500. Now, as the value that you can calculate by of introducing a new tool of the process, well, basically codeless automation tool, for example, which is designed to help you to be able to build tests faster and save on test maintenance, is basically you don't even need the new numbers for the new tool if you have a little bit of statistics comparing the speed of test creation, right? You can get the price of a test and just multiplied by difference between how many you can create within certain period of time, within a year, with a new tool, minus how many you can create the old way. For example, if a tool allows you to be 10 times more efficient, then the amount of tests you will be able to, the same person will be able to build within a year would be 1,200 minus 120, the old way. So we get the total number is 1,080, and with the total price of the test being 5,500, it is 5,500 times 1,080, which is roughly $5.5 million. So it sounds like absolutely ridiculous, but what you're calculating here is the following. You're calculating, hey, we got this new tool, which is X times more efficient. So let's calculate, and it allows us to get this kind of results. So 1,200 tests, for example, within a year. So having the old way of doing that, it will take us n years to build. And basically, the value of a new tool is that all those additional years of building and maintaining tests, which we do not have to do because we will have this new tool and we will be able to achieve it faster. So basically, the efficiency here is that you're saving of that time, which is basically tangible. Like if then converted to salary, it's tangible amount of money, and say, hey, like we won't need to spend that amount of money in order to be able to achieve exactly the same result. This is what is meant by efficiency, and this is a way to calculate the improved efficiency. And I will be happy to share the article where we detail each of the approach with examples. in the article, as well as a link where it goes into a lot of calculations to figure out this magic 4.5 number based on industry statistics. All right. And those are probably the most direct and commonly used approaches in order to be able to calculate ROI of your new fancy tool or approach which you are promoting within your organization. Of course, there might be other ones. It's not. I'm not claiming to be 100% comprehensive. However, those I believe are the most sensible and commonly used, and will probably have the most impact in your organization. On that, I'm open to questions. Sorry.
Great. Thanks, Artem. While we wait for people to type in any questions they might have, I thought we might talk about the polls a little bit. Were the responses that you saw here kind of what you were expecting as far as the number of percentages automated? Looks like most are in the 0 to 30%, and then an even spread amongst the other categories.
I'm not sure I can see the results well.
Go to polls and then hit open. You should be able to see the results there. If not, I can read them to you.
All right.
Oh, wait. Well, let's see. We have a question that came in. How do you factor complexity of tests in this calculation? Not all tests are of the same level of complexity.
So that exactly is the point. When you calculating ROI, it's a great point. So the way you deal with varying degree of complexity is by expanding your time range. So once you expanded your time range for calculations to a wider range, for example, a year or 2 years, then it will allow you to basically catch different tests of different varying degree of complexity altogether. And again, you can, when you do the estimations for your new tool, you should definitely make sure that you cover different types of tests to estimate how your team will be able to deal with tests in different degrees. You should evaluate how it works for simple tests as well as complex tests. And yes, we got the results in. As you can see, the vast majority of people have their test coverage in below 30%, which is the what we always see when we ask the question. It's across the board average, and then it goes from there. Very little percentage. So 40% basically is 0 to 30, and others are around 12 to 15%. All right, and another question that you're probably also curious is how people are calculating ROI. And well, the majority answered that we do not calculate, and this is exactly what this webinar is for. And we'll share additional materials for that. Hopefully, it will help you to get there. It will be much more impressive and impactful, and it will help you to achieve your goals in QA. However, from the ways people do it is a lot of people surprisingly use improved efficiency. It's 35% and 18% calculated based on fewer bugs in production. Well, that's great. It is interesting and a great way to calculate the ROI. It's just probably also important to realize that there are other ways. And if you see that your particular way of how you calculate ROI right now does not give you the impact with leadership that you would expect, you might want to consider other ways of calculating the ROI to see which way would produce the most impact in your particular case in order to be able to move things forward and achieve your goals.
We have another question that's coming in. Can you please elaborate on how you use the 4.5 in calculating the maintenance of tests? You mentioned an article. So I don't know if you have that article URL today or if they should just expect to get that in an email post event.
It is, I will share it post the event. I can extract it from the article with calculations and add it as an additional link to be shared.
Okay.
Sarah, I assume that we can do it alongside with sharing the recording of this webinar. Is that correct?
We'll talk about the different options.
All right.
There's a couple of different ways to do that. We have a question from John F. What mechanics do you recommend to save and reuse the test cases when written in English? How to set up to execute a batch of these tests?
Okay, so this is very straightforward. I guess in this case, I'll just share a screen and show you how does it look like to make it easier to understand. So this is the test cases. This is how they look like. So this is direct commands like this one, and those are functions in a sense. So as you can see, you can use any kind of terminology in there to match your own terminology in your own test cases. But point being is that as soon as you created a number of those test cases, then you can just execute them all at the same time, and they will be executed in parallel. And this is why we believe it is important for people who are building first test automation, and non-technical people like manual testers will be able to do that. This is why it's important to understand the main concepts, and that repeatability and being able to run the test independently as soon as test cases are built that way. You can literally just execute them all in parallel, and this is by default what testRigor does to help to improve performance.
Great. I don't have any new questions that have come in. Wait, here's one. Fazil asks, how much of this will help in automation of mobile games, which are built using mobile game frameworks like Cocos 2DX, Unity, Flutter game engine?
I believe there are special tools to help you to test those games. In general, game testing is very challenging. Even though some people did use the tools like testRigor to test games, have not been designed for this use case. And the challenges with the games oftentimes include changes at runtime and minute millisecond responses, because it's very hard to emulate and catch exact moments and do exact things at exactly right time. And the key phrase here is exactly the right time. Traditional testing system have not been created this way. However, if you Google, there are several frameworks which had been designed specifically to build tests for gaming. And if you'd like to connect with me after this call, I will connect you with companies which do exactly that. So there are, as I assume, it's not trivial. However, there are tools exist out there to help out with uh, specifically testing games, which is a little bit different type of testing.
We have a follow-up question from John about the test cases. What about revisions to test case over time to match application changes?
Yes, exactly. So you have to pick and choose. Depends on the tool. Specifically, in case of testRigor, because testRigor specification is not just plain English; it is plain text on purpose. testRigor does not store any information about details of implementation of your application, because we believe that the test should be the specification which executes. And since it's plain text, it's very much versionable. You can store your technically test scripts. You can store them in Git if you'd like to, and execute the test from Git, overwriting the test in the UI every single time. Or we are rolling out soon the new updated UI, where you will have basically GitHub-like interface for non-technical people. Well, it's somewhere in between GitHub and Google Doc, to be more specific, to help non-technical people to deal with versioning, see who changed what, when, and what did it end up with, and all this kind of stuff. And of course, if you're having it in Git, if you're pairing it with your code, then you can manage branches and so on and so forth. And this is, I guess, what you're talking about. Yes, so just as soon as you store it in the code in Git, then it should be good to go.
Okay, and now we have a follow-up question from Kent saying, if not for games testing, what about mobile application testing?
Oh yeah, testRigor definitely helps out with that. There are also several tools, codeless automation tools for mobile. In testRigor, you can use exactly same language, plain English, to test web. So it could be web, mobile, or combination thereof. And make sure the documentation. Give me 1 second. So this is our documentation. You can literally just go to our testRigor.com and click on plain English. This is how you can access the documentation right now. And there are a lot of stuff. And what I wanted to show specifically is a way how you can how we can deal with cross web and mobile tests. So that is something which people rarely test and is considerable not testable, even though in some cases it might be a very important flow. In some cases, switching between web and mobile is important. Imagine that we're talking about, let's say, I don't know, like any application like Amazon, for example, right? If you purchased something on your mobile application, you must be able to see your order when you log in into your account in web. Otherwise, it is a gigantic issue. So in testRigor, what you do, you just start new browser or device, and you switch between devices, and that's it. You can have multiple of those. You can test things like chat, and so on and so forth. And of course, all the same language applies to web, with addition of some specific actions like swipe and long press, in order to be able to, with long click, or you can say long press, in order to be able to access the specific functionality of mobile. But yes, definitely you can do mobile. Not only that, testRigor also provides you with a way to test two-factor authentication features, such as two-factor authentication or one-time password login with email, text message, or Google authenticators, and so on and so forth. So you can therefore test features like login with Google, and as well as a lot of other things alongside with testing both and mobile and API, all within the same one test, all using the same simple plain English language.
Great. And Kent is also asking if there's any integration with device simulators and device clouds, such as Perfecto, Sauce Labs, Cobaton.
Yes. So if you go to settings specifically, I'll show you where's integrations. Probably most popular integrations are with test case management tools such as TestRail, X-Ray, and Zephyr. However, you also can integrate with providers such as Sauce Labs, Browser Stack, Lambda Test, Cobiton. Can't see it in here, but we do support Cobiton as well. And I think there are others. I'll have to double check.
Okay.
So the point being is, if you can't find certain specific infrastructure you care about, but you need to test it, you definitely can and should use infrastructure providers like the ones you mentioned. And you can do it in testRigor.
Cool. Cindy is asking about more of a demo of testRigor. Do you want to try and use some of the time we have left today, or would it be better for her to follow up for a more detailed demo?
Well, it probably would be better to follow up for a demo. Sarah, feel free to share my email in the chat here.
Okay.
And I can. Is there any specific website that you'd like to see? I can do it on, I guess. Like I can do Amazon, Google, whatever. It doesn't matter. Oh, Twitter. I guess I love to do it on Twitter. One more time on Twitter again. And we'll log out, of course. So what I would be showing as a demo is, it doesn't log out. Where I go? I'll be showing a sign-up demo because it involves several interesting concepts, such as repeatability, use of emails, using variables, and so on and so forth. And we'll do it relatively quickly because we are close to end of the time anyway. So how to automate sign up with Twitter? Let's copy Twitter URL here. Let's go to testRigor, create a new test feed, Twitter, and will not provide username and password. However, usually you would provide username and password. This is the way to hide your credentials and use it with a login command. And we'll just generate one test just for demo purposes and create test suite. And now if you click on resources, I apologize, let me close this first. If you click on resources, there is a Chrome extension where you can install this extension in here, which we'll use to start creating a test. Of course, you can't record the test, which spans several systems like your email and things like that. It's not technically possible, but we don't need that. All we need to do is just start with something and some tests. Change it because we can't reuse the same email. And we would need to confirm it in the first place. And next, let's select some random numbers. Next. Next. And I don't think I need to change anything here. Sign up. And voila, it is asking for verification code. So we will stop the recording and we'll go for our Twitter. And that is sign up. And our system automatically tries to detect if we are already logged in. And of course, in some cases, misfires, like in this example. So I'll just remove that. It detected the name of the fact, so we'll fix that. Now, this is exactly the point I was talking about when I was saying that there are certain concepts of test automation people should know, regardless what tool we are using. It could be Selenium, it could be testRigor, it could be any other tool. It's exactly the same. And this particular case is repeatability. You can't sign up with the same email second time. It's just not going to work. So what we will do is we will just use our generate command, and happily enough, you already have generate unique email. You don't even have to provide any kind of setup in here. Just copy paste. It will save it into new email variable, and we'll copy that.
Hey, Artem, I think we might need a refresh. We're still on the verification code box. I don't know if it's...
Oh, you don't see what I'm doing. Okay, so sorry about that. I will click add and run. And get back to in here. So it's automatically generated test. This is our test. Thank you for letting me know. I used to deal with Zoom. It does show that. Anyway, so this is what I've been recording, except as I was mentioning, I replaced entering this static email, which we entered when we were recording it, with this generate unique email command. And it's basically generated new email and saved it in here. And then there are all those other steps, next, sign up. And next, what we need to do is check that email to stored value. Oops. Email was received. So that would be the first step. And I'll show you even more in a second. So I kicked it off. What's happening right now is testRigor is starting a new server. In our case, Ubuntu. When it starts a browser, it would be Chrome in our case, and of course, you can select multiple OSs and browsers, and then it waits until landing page is load. When you created the test suite specified landing page, which is twitter.com in this particular case, and then after it is done, it executes the instructions the same way a human would do it. So innovation in this particular case is that testRigor does it the same way a human tester would execute the tests manually, and it will highlight where it does it. Of course, you can enable recording a video if you'd like to. And basically, this is it, and it goes all the way in here. After sign up, it shows this send your code, and when they say check that email, it actually did receive an email because that command to generate email generated email such that it could be used. Actually, it will receive an email. And when you receive an email, testRigor, and you're checking for it, testRigor will actually render it for you. So this is that email rendered, and now we need to extract this code. There are a couple of ways you can do it. You can do it by format, so there are 6 digits. You can use that, or you can just get some text, get a text below this paragraph, and you can identify this paragraph by unique name, this verification code. Just there is a catch: you can't use just verification code because verification code words is used in other places as well, like this subject on left top corner. And let's do exactly that. So we need to grab value text below this verification code and save it as code. And we need to testRigor renders the email in the browser such that you can take advantage of all testRigor features which usually apply to interacting with the browser. So you need to basically switch back to original window, switch to tab 1, first tab, and then you need to use this code to enter into verification code, right? So all you do is enter stored value. It's a reference to variable, basically, code in this case, into verification code, I believe, is from end user's perspective. And let's update and see how that's going to work. But as you can see, those are all plain, straightforward instructions to what to do, similar way to how you would write it in your test cases if you were to go to be a little bit more detailed. Of course, it's a little bit more detailed than you would usually have them, but this is automation, therefore you have to be more specific. And anyway, so we clicked sign up in here. It rendered this field. Let's double check. Yes, the field name is verification code. So it renders the email. Now it grabs value. It highlighted this paragraph, which you referred to, and showed what does it mean to be below it. And it found the first text below this paragraph. So it grabbed that. You can expand it and click show more, show extra info to see what it actually grabbed. 511264, which is exactly what we need. And when we switched back, and here we entered the data. And of course, I'm not going to continue because I don't want to spam Twitter. But point being is that here, even though it is a straightforward test, it showed several concepts. That is repeatability, unique data generation, working with email, grabbing data from the screen, in this case, verification code, and using variables. So we use two variables, new email and code. So there are several concepts in just one test. That's why I showed it.
Great. Well, I see Connie's answering the last question we had, but it is now 3 o'clock Eastern, so we are out of time. Thank you to everybody. Thank you to Artem for that great presentation. I think we all learned a lot. If you're adding questions now and we haven't gotten into them, they will be shared and they can follow up on them later. Thank you to testRigor for sponsoring the web seminar and sharing great information, and a special thank you out to our audience for spending the last hour with us. Have a great day. We hope to see you at a future event.
Yes, and testRigor can be deployed on premise. Answering the last question, and thank you very much for attending this presentation. And if you have more questions, don't hesitate to ping us directly or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Excellent.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Artem. Bye.
Bye-bye.